Russia's entire economy is about to implode. The Russian economy is expected to fall by 6% this year, according to an increase of 2.5% points in the IMPLODE's forecast of the country's 2022 gross domestic product. In today's video, we'll talk about Russia's current economic state, so stay until the end of the video to learn it all. Russia will run out of money in the next 18 months. Vladimir Putin kept the Russian economic collapse a secret from the West. He has manipulated statistics, omitted relevant economic information, and cherry-picked information. Due to President Vladimir Putin's protracted, unprovoked war in Ukraine, exports to the sanctioned nation are falling precipitously, causing Russia's economy to collapse. The mainstream media have accepted Putin's statements, but that is a stupid error. Local authorities are protesting in the background during parliamentary sessions. Despite having what could seem to be a solid military position, Russia's economy is crumbling. The subtle but alarming leaks have revealed that the Russian economy is on the verge of collapse. Western sanctions have caused a $600 billion outflow of business from Russia. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, this has effectively destroyed 30 years' worth of foreign investments. The GDP of Russia is barely $1.4 trillion, so you can see how serious this is. Nearly overnight, 42% of Russia's GDP left the nation. Since the invasion of Ukraine, more than 1,000 enterprises have abandoned their operations in Russia. Russia asserts that sanctions have resulted in losing 12 to 15% of direct employment. According to Russia's statistics, 35 to 40% of the country's labor force is thought to be indirectly unemployed. This is because one man's income is another man's expense. If 12 to 15% of individuals lose their jobs unexpectedly, they will also cease buying other goods and services. According to Russia's statistics, this raises the unemployment rate from 35 to 40%. Despite being mired in an attrition battle, it didn't foresee 6 months after encroaching on Ukraine. Russia is succeeding on another front. Despite being in a severe recession, its oil-dependent economy is proving to be considerably more durable than anticipated. Andrei Nechayev, who served as Russia's finance minister in the early 1990s, claims that as he travels around Moscow, the same traffic delays that were present previously are present. Although China and India's willingness to buy inexpensive Russian oil has helped, Nechayev and other analysts claim that due to Western sanctions, Russia's economy has begun to deteriorate and will certainly experience a protracted period of stagnation. Except for a few empty stores, where once dominant Western brands have fled the nation in their hundreds, not much appears to have changed on the surface. Starbucks, SBUX, cafes are already gradually reopening under the barely covered moniker Stars Coffee, while McDonald's, MCD, is now known as Vkusnoye Tochka or Tasty, and that's it. Exodus of Western companies and a never-ending barrage of punitive sanctions from the West aimed at Russia's crucial energy exports and financial system are impacting, but not in the way many had anticipated. Nechayev, who oversaw some of the most volatile economic periods in Russia's history and assisted in guiding the country's transition to a market economy, attributes some of this to the central bank. As the West froze almost half of Russia's $600 billion foreign exchange reserves in the wake of the invasion, the ruble fell to a record low against the US dollar earlier this year. But since then, it has recovered to reach its highest level since 2018 against the US dollar. Those rate increases and strong capital controls from the spring have since been virtually undone. Interest rates are currently lower than before the war, and the central bank projects that inflation, which peaked in April at roughly 18%, will range between 12% and 15% for the entire year. The central bank has also increased its prediction for the year's GDP, which is now expected to contract by 4% to 6%. An 8% to 10% contraction was anticipated for April. Additionally, the International Monetary Fund now projects a 6% decline. As a result of the sanctions put in place by the West after Moscow annexed Crimea in 2014, the Kremlin had 8 years to prepare, which was helpful. Because the central bank has a backup payment system, the exit of MasterCard and Visa barely had an impact on domestic payments, claims Nechayev. In 2017, Russia launched the Mir credit card and its system for handling transactions. Rumors of Russia's economic survival had been significantly overstated, according to a Yale University research published last month, and examined high-frequency consumer, trade, and shipping data that its authors claim presents a clearer picture than what the Kremlin is presenting. The article claimed that Russian economic growth is catastrophically crippled due to international sanctions and the departure of more than 1,000 multinational corporations. Moscow is now having trouble procuring inputs, parts, and technology from increasingly uneasy trading partners, and as a result, its domestic economy is experiencing severe supply shortages. Russian domestic production has reached a complete standstill with no capacity to replace lost businesses, products, and talent. Due to the business retreat, Russia has lost enterprises accounting for almost 40% of its GDP, undoing over 3 decades' worth of foreign investment and supporting an unprecedented simultaneous capital and people flight in a mass exodus of Russia's economic basis. The Kremlin's rigorous capital control measures, which were put in place to reduce the amount of foreign money leaving the country, and sanctions that limited its ability to import, were mainly blamed for the Russian economy's apparent resilience and the ruble's comeback. Because Russia is the second-largest exporter of oil and gas in the world, the impact of the war and related sanctions on its GDP has been mitigated by high commodity prices and Europe's temporary need for Russian energy. The Kremlin finances are in much worse shape than is generally believed. Putin is resorting to patently unsustainable, dramatic fiscal and monetary intervention to smooth over these structural economic weaknesses, which has already sent his government budget into deficit for the first time in years and drained his foreign reserves, even with high energy prices, they said. Looking ahead, there is no way for Russia to avoid economic destruction as long as the allied nations stick together and continue to put pressure on Russia through sanctions. The facts are that the Russian economy is reeling by any yardstick and on any level, and now is not the time to step on the brakes. Defeatist headlines claiming that Russia's economy has recovered are just untrue. The Russian Finance Ministry recently revealed that other Russian ministries are asking for greater spending of 5 trillion rubles annually. That amounts to an increase in spending of $84 billion a year, or $7 billion, more than what is currently being spent each month. If spending continues at its current rate, Russia will run out of money in about 12 months. In a sense, Russia's emergency fund is a ticking time bomb that will shortly detonate. The collapse of Russia will have serious global repercussions. Fortunately for China, the entire Russian debt is only $472 billion. However, a Russian uprising might happen before Putin can execute anything. Clint Watts, a former FBI special agent, predicts that there is a good likelihood that either a military coup or a public uprising will lead to a revolt. Putin has done a fantastic job of preventing a coup, but one could still happen. Putin has implemented countermeasures, but Ukrainian intelligence claims that Russian generals and KGB officers are plotting to topple him. An elite military organization called the Salavarts would be used to carry out such a coup. The Salavarts are thought to constitute the foundation of Putin's government. They allegedly possess the capacity to employ military troops, state prosecutors, and intelligence networks. If the Salavarts were to stage a coup, it would undoubtedly be accomplished before Russia ran out of money. Putin may be removed from power over the next 4 to 12 months, since Russia has enough reserves to last for 12 to 18 months. With that, we've come to an end. See you next time. Goodbye.